The signal came from the darkest edges of known space, where stars grew thin and the void stretched endlessly between dying suns. It was a cry for help, broadcast on every frequency, repeated over and over in a language that begged for someone to listen. Admiral Kevin Marsh stood alone on the observation deck of the Relentless Dawn, Earth's most powerful warship. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. But Kevin's attention was fixed on the holographic display floating before him. The message played again, translated into English by the ship's computers. A female voice, filled with terror and desperation, spoke words that made Kevin's chest tighten. "This is High Priestess Solani of the Volhari sovereignty. Our world is dying. The Devourer swarm has found us. They number in the billions. Our defenses are failing. We beg any civilization who hears this message to send aid. Please, our children are dying. Our history is burning. We cannot survive alone. If anyone is listening, if anyone cares, please help us." The message ended, then started again from the beginning. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant walked up beside Kevin, her tablet clutched to her chest. She was young for her rank, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a quick mind that had earned her a place on the flagship. "Sir, we've confirmed the source," Lisa said quietly. "The Volhari homeworld. It's 14 hyperspace jumps from here, deep in what the Galactic Council calls neutral territory." Kevin nodded slowly. "What do we know about the Volhari?" Lisa pulled up information on her tablet. "They're a peaceful species, advanced in arts, philosophy, medicine. They've contributed more to galactic culture than almost any other civilization. But they have almost no military. They believe the Council's treaties would protect them. And the Devourer swarm?" Lisa's face grew pale. "They're exactly what they sound like, sir. A species that exists only to consume. They travel from system to system, eating everything alive, then moving on. They've destroyed at least 12 civilizations that we know of. No one has ever stopped them." Kevin turned away from the display and walked to the massive windows that looked out into space. Beyond the glass, a dozen warships of the Third Fleet hung in perfect formation. These were humanity's finest vessels, built with technology that advanced at a staggering pace since humans first discovered they were not alone in the universe. 60 years ago, humanity had been confined to its home solar system. Then they had found the remnants of an alien probe crashed on Mars, and everything changed. Within a decade, humans had reverse-engineered faster than light travel. Within 2 decades, they had encountered other species. The galaxy had not welcomed them warmly. The Galactic Council, a loose federation of ancient alien civilizations, had looked upon humanity with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Humans were young. Humans were aggressive. Humans had spent most of their history fighting each other. The Council had granted Earth-limited trading rights, but made it clear that humanity was not considered an equal. Kevin remembered those early years well. He had been a young officer then, watching as alien diplomats talked down to human representatives, as other species refused to share technology or knowledge, as humanity was repeatedly told to wait its turn and prove itself worthy. But humans were not good at waiting. They were not good at accepting their place. And they were very, very good at building weapons. The fleet behind Kevin was proof of that. 200 warships spread across human space, each one a masterpiece of engineering and firepower. The galaxy had expected humanity to remain small and weak. Instead, humanity had built an armada. "Sir," Lisa said carefully, "the Galactic Council has already issued a statement about the Volhari situation. They've declared it a natural event and advised all member species to maintain non-interference." Kevin's jaw tightened. Natural event. Billions of innocent people dying is a natural event. That's their position, sir. They say the Devour Swarm is simply following its nature, and that intervention would disrupt the cosmic balance. Lisa paused. No species has responded to the distress call. Not one. Kevin stood in silence for a long moment. Through the windows, he could see the stars stretching into infinity. Somewhere out there, a world was burning. Somewhere out there, parents were holding their children and waiting to die. Somewhere out there, a priestess was sending her message into the void, hoping against hope that someone would care enough to answer. He thought about human history. He thought about all the times people had stood by while others suffered. He thought about the lessons humanity had learned through centuries of war and tragedy. He thought about the promise they had made to themselves when they finally united as a species and reached for the stars. Never again. Never again would they stand by and do nothing while innocents died. Lisa, Kevin said quietly, get me a secure channel to Fleet Command. Priority 1. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. Sir, are you suggesting we respond to the distress call? Kevin turned to face her. His expression was calm, but there was something burning in his eyes that made Lisa take a step back. I'm not suggesting anything, Lieutenant Commander. I'm telling you that we are going to help those people. The Council can issue all the statements they want. We're not part of their council. We don't answer to them. But, sir, the Devour Swarm has destroyed entire civilizations. We'd be going alone. No support from any other species. Kevin allowed himself a small, grim smile. Then, we'd better bring enough firepower to make up for it. Contact Admiral Patricia Wells at Fleet Command. Tell her I'm requesting authorization to mobilize every available ship for a rescue operation in Valhari space. Lisa stared at him for a moment, then nodded and hurried to the communications station. As she worked, Kevin turned back to the window and the stars beyond. The galaxy had spent 60 years underestimating humanity. They had called humans primitive. They had called humans warlike. They had said humans would never amount to anything significant on the galactic stage. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Kevin Marsh had no illusions about what lay ahead. The battle would be brutal. People would die. Ships would be lost. But somewhere in the darkness, a world full of innocent lives was waiting for someone to care enough to help them. And humanity would answer that call. No matter the cost, the distress signal continued to play softly in the background, the priestess's voice echoing through the bridge. Kevin listened to it one more time, memorizing every word, letting it fuel the fire in his heart. We're coming, he whispered to the stars. Hold on, we're coming. The message from Admiral Kevin Marsh spread through Earth's military command like wildfire. Within hours, it had reached every fleet station, every shipyard, every officer who wore the uniform of Earth's Navy, and the response was immediate. Admiral Patricia Wells sat in the war room at Fleet Command Headquarters on Luna, Earth's moon. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back tight and a face that showed decades of service. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of every human warship in known space. He wants everything we can spare, Patricia said to the room full of senior officers. Every ship that can make the journey. General Scott Murphy, commander of Earth's ground forces, leaned forward in his chair. That's a big ask. We're talking about sending our fleet into unknown territory to fight an enemy that has never been beaten. That's exactly what we're talking about, Patricia replied calmly. The question is whether we're willing to do it. The room fell silent. On the main display, the distress signal from the Valhari homeworld continued to broadcast. The priestess's voice filled the chamber, her words heavy with desperation and fading hope. Commander Rachel Torres, a young officer who had risen quickly through the ranks, spoke up. Ma'am, I've run the numbers. If we mobilize the 3rd, 5th, and 7 fleets. We can assemble over 200 warships at the staging point within 48 hours. 200 ships against billions of enemy units, muttered Admiral Charles Wong, an older man with a cautious reputation. The math doesn't look good. Patricia stood and walked to the main display. She touched a control, and the image changed to show the Volhari homeworld. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green, not so different from Earth. Cities sparkled on its surface. Forests covered its continents. Oceans gleamed under its sun. "Look at this world," Patricia said quietly. "Look at it and tell me we shouldn't try." Charles shook his head. "I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm saying we need to be realistic about what we're facing." "I am being realistic," Patricia replied. "I'm being realistic about who we are. Humanity didn't get to the stars by being careful. We didn't survive our own history by playing it safe. We took risks. We fought for what we believed in. We never accepted that some things were impossible." She turned to face the assembled officers. "The Galactic Council has already written off the Volhari. They've decided that saving them isn't worth the effort. That's who they are. But that's not who we are." General Scott Murphy slowly nodded. "I have 3 divisions of Marines ready to deploy. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. We'll need ground forces to protect civilian evacuations." Commander Rachel Torres added, "The carrier groups can launch over 10,000 fighters. If we coordinate properly, we can establish air superiority around the planet." One by one, the officers in the room voiced their support. Ships were assigned. Routes were planned. Supply lines were established. The machinery of war began to move. 48 hours later, at staging point, Echo on the edge of human territory, the fleet assembled. Kevin Marsh stood on the bridge of the Relentless Dawn and watched through the viewports as ship after ship emerged from hyperspace. Battle cruisers, carriers, destroyers, frigates, support vessels, medical ships, troop transports. They came in waves, each arrival adding to the growing wall of steel that hung against the stars. 217 warships in total, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled for a single operation. Captain Maria Vance commanded the carrier Enduring Spirit. She was a small woman with dark hair and fierce eyes, known throughout the fleet for her tactical genius. Her ship carried over 3,000 fighters, each one piloted by some of the best men and women Earth had trained. Captain Greg Palmer led the heavy cruiser Iron Covenant. He was a large man with a booming voice and a reputation for leading from the front. His ship was built for close combat, its armor thick enough to withstand tremendous punishment. Captain Nick Davis commanded the destroyer Lightning Strike. He was young and aggressive, his ship designed for speed and precision attacks. He had personally volunteered for the mission the moment he heard about it. These officers and dozens more like them gathered in holographic conference with Kevin Marsh to plan the battle ahead. Intelligence reports suggest the Devour Swarm has surrounded the Volhari homeworld completely, Kevin explained, gesturing to a tactical display. Their numbers are estimated at over 3 billion individual units, ranging from small fighter-sized organisms to massive hive ships several kilometers long. Maria Vance studied the display carefully. The hive ships are the key. They coordinate the smaller units. If we can take them out, the swarm loses cohesion. Agreed, Kevin said. But getting to the hive ships won't be easy. We'll have to fight through layers of defenders. Greg Palmer grinned, a fierce expression that showed his eagerness for battle. That's what we're here for, Admiral. Point us at the enemy and let us do what we do best. Kevin nodded slowly. I want everyone to understand what we're facing. This won't be like any battle we've fought before. The enemy has numbers beyond anything we've encountered. We will take losses. People will die. He paused, letting his words sink in. But remember why we're here. There's a world full of innocent people depending on us. They called for help, and we answered. That means something. That has to mean something. Nick Davis spoke up, his voice steady. Sir, every person on my ship volunteered for this mission. They know the risks. They want to be here. Similar statements came from other commanders. Across the fleet, crews had been given the choice to stay behind or join the rescue mission. Not a single person had refused. Kevin felt a surge of pride for the men and women under his command. This was what humanity could be at its best. Not conquerors or tyrants, but protectors, guardians, people who ran toward danger to help those who could not help themselves. Final preparations are complete. Lisa Grant reported from her station. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump. Kevin took a deep breath and opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice carried across 200 ships, reaching tens of thousands of ears. This is Admiral Marsh. In a few minutes, we will make the jump to Volhari space. We are going into a fight that some say we cannot win. The galaxy expects us to fail. The Council expects us to fail. But they don't know us. He paused, letting the silence stretch. We are humanity. We have faced extinction and survived. We have faced our own darkest nature and overcome it. We do not abandon those in need. We do not walk away from the innocent. Today, we show the galaxy what that means. Kevin looked out at his fleet one final time, then gave the order. All ships, engage hyperspace drives. Let's go save a world. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the fleet vanished into the void. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace into a nightmare. Kevin Marsh had prepared himself for what they might find. But nothing could have truly made him ready for the sight that filled the viewports of the relentless dawn. The Volhari homeworld hung in space like a wounded jewel, its beautiful blue and green surface barely visible through the swarm that surrounded it. Billions of creatures filled local space. They moved like a living cloud, a mass of organic ships that ranged from small fighters no bigger than a car to massive hive ships that stretched for kilometers. The swarm pulsed and shifted, individual units moving in strange patterns that somehow created a unified whole. On the bridge, Lisa Grant's voice was barely a whisper. My God, there are so many of them. Kevin forced himself to stay calm. Fear was natural. Fear was human. But fear could not be allowed to control them. Not now. Not when so much depended on what they did next. All ships maintain formation, Kevin ordered, his voice steady. This is what we came for. This is the enemy. And we are going to beat them. Across the fleet, weapon systems powered up. Shields activated. Fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits and ran final checks. The machinery of human warfare prepared to unleash itself. On the planet's surface far below, High Priestess Solani stood in the command center of her people's last remaining stronghold. The once beautiful chamber was now filled with smoke and the sounds of distant explosions. For 3 days, her people had fought desperately to hold back the swarm. But they were losing. The planetary shields that had protected her world for generations were failing. Entire cities had already fallen. Millions of her people had died. The survivors huddled in underground shelters, waiting for the end. Solani was tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large silver eyes that now shone with exhaustion and grief. She had been High Priestess for 30 years, a spiritual and political leader who had guided her people through times of peace and prosperity. Now she watched helplessly as everything she loved was destroyed. High Priestess called one of her officers, his voice trembling. We are detecting new contacts at the edge of the system. Many contacts. Hundreds of ships. Seleni's heart sank. More of the swarm. More death coming for her people. How long until they reach us? The officer stared at his display, confusion crossing his face. That is strange. These readings are different. These are not swarm signatures. They appear to be artificial vessels, made of metal, using technology. Show me, Solani demanded. The main display flickered and changed. Solani saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. Ships, real ships, built with purpose and precision, carrying weapons that even from this distance she could sense were powerful. They hung in formation at the system's edge, a wall of gray steel facing the impossible mass of the swarm. "We are receiving a transmission," the officer said, his voice rising with sudden hope. "They say they are from Earth. They say they are here to help. Earth, the young species. The ones the Council called primitive and dangerous. The ones who had built their fleet so quickly that it alarmed the older civilizations. The ones who were known throughout the galaxy for their strange custom of fighting for those who could not fight for themselves." "Put them through," Solani ordered. A human face appeared on her display. Male, middle-aged, with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a uniform marked with symbols of rank that Solani did not recognize. "This is Admiral Kevin Marsh of the Earth Fleet," the human said. "We received your distress call. We are here to help you." Solani felt tears forming in her eyes. "Admiral, the swarm numbers in the billions. The Galactic Council declared our situation hopeless. No one else came. Why are you here?" Kevin's expression did not change. "Because you asked for help. That's all the reason we need." Before Solani could respond, the tactical display showed the human fleet beginning to move. The wall of ships advanced toward the swarm. And then space itself seemed to explode. The Relentless Dawn's main batteries opened fire first. Massive energy beams cutting through the void and tearing into the swarm. Thousands of creatures died in the first second, their bodies vaporizing under the assault. But thousands more took their place, swarming toward the human fleet like angry insects. Maria Vance launched her fighters from the enduring Spirit. 10,000 small craft burst from the carrier's hangar bays and swept into battle. They flew in tight formations, their weapons blazing, cutting paths through the swarm. "All fighters maintain wing discipline," Maria ordered from her command chair. "Cover each other. Watch your six. We're going to be here a while." Greg Palmer drove the Iron Covenant straight into the heart of a swarm cluster. His ship's armor absorbed blow after blow as smaller creatures crashed against the hull. His weapons carved burning lines through the enemy, each shot destroying dozens of targets. "Keep firing," Greg roared at his crew. "Don't give them time to regroup. Show them what human engineering can do." Nick Davis and the Lightning Strike raced along the edges of the battle, striking at swarm units that tried to flank the main fleet. His ship was a blur of motion, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy to target it. "Contact on the left," called his weapons officer. "Looks like a hive ship trying to coordinate a counterattack." "Take it out," Nick ordered. The Lightning Strike turned hard and unleashed a barrage of missiles. The hive ship, a massive organic structure covered with smaller creatures, tried to evade. It was too slow. The missiles struck home, and the hive ship exploded in a fountain of organic material all across the battle space. Similar scenes played out. Human ships fought with skill and fury, their crews working as one to push back against the impossible numbers of the swarm. The creatures came in waves, endless waves, but each wave broke against the human fleet. On the planet's surface, Solani watched the battle with growing amazement. The humans were actually winning. Slowly, steadily, they were carving a path through the swarm toward her world. "High Priestess," her officer reported. "The humans have established a corridor. They are sending shuttles to evacuate our civilians." Solani could not believe what she was hearing. "They are coming to save our people?" "Yes, they are asking for coordinates of our population centers. They want to begin immediate evacuation." Solani finally allowed herself to hope. For the first time in days, she believed that her people might survive. These humans, these strangers from a young world, had traveled across the galaxy to fight an enemy that no one else would face. She reached for her communication device and opened a channel to the human. Admiral Marsh, I do not have words to thank you. Your people are saving mine. Whatever you need, whatever we can give you, it is yours. Kevin's face appeared on her screen again. He looked tired now, the strain of battle showing in his eyes. But his voice remained calm and determined. High Priestess, we don't want payment. We don't want reward. We just want your people to be safe. Now please help us coordinate the evacuation. We have a lot of work to do. Solani nodded, wiping tears from her silver eyes. Yes, Admiral. Together, we will save my people. The battle raged on, human and swarm locked in combat that shook the very stars. But for the first time, the swarm faced an enemy that refused to break. An enemy that would not run. An enemy that had crossed the galaxy to stand against the darkness. Humanity had come to fight, and they would not stop until the job was done. The battle for the Velhari homeworld entered its second day, and the cost was beginning to show. Commander Danny Price led the ground evacuation from a makeshift command post in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful Velhari temple. The building's graceful spires had been shattered by swarm attacks, its walls scarred by fire and combat. But it still stood, and that made it useful. Danny was a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and hands that had seen decades of hard work. He had started his career as a simple Marine, fighting in the small conflicts that had marked humanity's early years among the stars. Now, he commanded thousands of ground troops in the largest rescue operation in human history. Report, he called out to his officers, his voice carrying through the chaos around him. Sergeant Amy Cole ran up, her armor covered in dust and strange organic matter from the swarm creatures she had been fighting. She was young but tough, one of the best soldiers Danny had ever worked with. Sir, we've secured 3 more evacuation zones in the southern continent. Shuttles are landing now. Estimate, we can move 50,000 civilians in the next 4 hours. Danny nodded grimly. That's good, but we need to go faster. The shield generators are failing in the eastern sectors. When they go down, the swarm will pour through. The ground battle was different from the space combat above. Here, the fighting was personal. Human Marines met swarm creatures in close quarters, weapons blazing at ranges measured in meters rather than kilometers. The creatures were horrible things, twisted biological forms that existed only to consume. They had no fear, no hesitation, no mercy, but neither did the humans who faced them. Captain Laura Chun commanded the defensive evacuation Zone 7, a large open area where Velhari civilians waited in terrified groups for the shuttles that would carry them to safety. She was a small woman with short black hair and a reputation for staying calm under any pressure. Hold the line, Lavra ordered her Marines as another wave of swarm creatures charged their position. Nobody gets through. Not one of them. The Marines fired in disciplined volleys, their weapons cutting down the charging creatures. When the shooting stopped, the ground before them was covered with dead swarm units. But more were coming. There were always more. High Priestess Solani worked alongside the humans, helping to organize her people and keep them calm during the evacuation. She had insisted on remaining with the last of her civilians rather than taking an early shuttle to safety. Your people are remarkable, Solani told Danny during a brief pause in the fighting. They fight without rest. They carry our children to safety. They die protecting strangers. Danny wiped sweat from his face. That's what we do, ma'am. That's who we are. In orbit, the situation was equally desperate. Admiral Kevin Marsh stood on the bridge of the Relentless Dawn, coordinating the space battle while monitoring the ground operations below. His ship had taken heavy damage in the fighting. Entire sections were sealed off due to hull breaches. A third of his crew was injured, but the ship still fought. "Admiral, we've lost the destroyer's swift current," reported Lisa Grant, her voice tight with grief. "Direct hit from a hive ship." Kevin closed his eyes for a moment. 300 souls gone in an instant. 300 men and women who had volunteered to come here and fight. He forced himself to keep going. There would be time for mourning later. Right now, he had a battle to win. "Focus fire on that hive ship," Kevin ordered. "Make them pay for it." The relentless Dawn's weapons thundered. Beams of energy crossed the void and struck the hive ship that had destroyed the swift current. The massive organic vessel tried to evade, but it was too large, too slow. The human weapons tore it apart. Captain Maria Vance had lost a quarter of her fighters. The pilots who remained were exhausted, some of them having flown continuously for over 30 hours. But they kept fighting. They kept dying. "Red Squadron, form up on my wing," Maria ordered from her command chair on the Enduring Spirit. "We're going to hit that cluster of hive ships on the eastern approach." Her fighters swept into battle again, their weapons blazing. Another hive ship fell. Then another. Slowly, painfully, the humans were winning. On the ground, the evacuation continued. Shuttles rose from the surface, carrying terrified civilians to the safety of the orbital ships. Marines held defensive lines while swarm creatures threw themselves against human positions in endless waves. Danny Price found himself fighting hand-to-hand when a group of creatures broke through a weakened section of the line. His rifle empty, he drew his combat knife and met the enemy with nothing but steel and determination. Sergeant Amy Cole fought at his side, the two of them standing back-to-back as creatures swarmed around them. "This is not how I planned to spend my week," Amy shouted over the sounds of battle. Danny laughed despite everything. "Really? I thought you requested this assignment." A relief squad arrived just as Danny and Amy were about to be overwhelmed. Fresh Marines poured fire into the creatures, driving them back. Danny leaned against a shattered wall, catching his breath. "Sir," called a communications officer. "Message from Admiral Marsh. He says the orbital battle is shifting. The swarm is weakening. He's requesting we accelerate the evacuation." Danny straightened up immediately. "You heard the man. Get those civilians moving. I want every shuttle in the air." The third day dawned, and with it came the turning point. Admiral Kevin Marsh had been studying the swarm's behavior for 72 hours straight. He had watched their patterns, analyzed their movements, noticed the subtle ways they coordinated their attacks, and he had found their weakness. "The larger hive ships aren't just command vessels," Kevin announced to his senior officers in a hurried conference. "They're communication nodes. Take them out, and the smaller units lose their coordination." Captain Greg Palmer leaned forward eagerly. "How many hive ships are we talking about?" "I've identified 12 primary nodes. We destroy those and the swarm fragments. Then let's do it," Greg said. Kevin nodded and opened the channel to the fleet. "All capital ships, this is Admiral Marsh. I'm transmitting coordinates for priority targets. These are command hive ships. Every battery, every weapon, everything we have goes into destroying these targets. This is how we win." The human fleet reformed and charged. Battle cruisers led the way, their heavy armor absorbing the swarm's desperate counterattacks. Destroyers provided flanking fire. Fighters cleared paths through the smaller creatures. One by one, the command hive ships fell as each one died. The change was immediate and dramatic. Swarm creatures that had been fighting with terrifying coordination suddenly became confused. They stopped working together. They started attacking randomly or simply drifting without purpose. By the end of the third day, the swarm was broken. Millions of creatures remained, but without their command structure, they were no longer an organized threat. They scattered into space, fleeing in all directions. On the surface of the Volhari homeworld, the remaining swarm forces collapsed into chaos. Human marines swept through their lines, destroying the confused creatures and securing the last evacuation zones. Danny Price stood in the center of a battlefield littered with fallen enemies and watched the last shuttles rise toward the sky. Over 8 million Velhari civilians had been saved. Their world was scarred, their cities damaged, but their people would survive. Sergeant Amy Cole walked up beside him, her armor scorched and battered. "Sir, word from orbit. The Admiral says we did it. The swarm is retreating." Danny looked up at the sky, where he could see the distant flashes of the space battle finally coming to an end. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess we did." The silence after battle was always strange. Admiral Kevin Marsh stood on the observation deck of the Relentless Dawn and looked out at the Volhari homeworld turning slowly beneath his ship. The planet was scarred but alive. Its oceans still sparkled. Its forests still spread across continents. Its people still had a home. It had cost them dearly. 37 ships lost. 8,216 men and women dead. Every captain in the fleet could recite the names of those who had fallen under their command. Every survivor carried the weight of those who would never return home. But they had won. The Devour swarm was shattered. Its remnants fled into deep space, scattering in 1,000 directions. The creature that had destroyed 12 civilizations, that had been declared unstoppable by the wise and ancient races of the galaxy, had been broken by the young species from the small blue world called Earth. 3 days after the battle ended, a ceremony was held on the surface of the Volhari homeworld. High Priestess Solani insisted on it. She wanted her people to see their saviors face to face. Kevin Marsh walked through the great hall of the Temple of Stars, flanked by his senior officers. The building had survived the battle largely intact, and the Volhari had cleaned and decorated it for this occasion. Thousands of Velhari citizens lined the walls, their silver eyes watching the humans with something that looked like wonder. Solani waited at the far end of the hall, standing before an ancient altar that had witnessed 10,000 years of Volhari history. She wore ceremonial robes of deep blue, and her face was serene despite the tears that glistened in her eyes. Kevin stopped before her and bowed his head in respect. Behind him, his officers did the same. "Admiral Kevin Marsh," Solani said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You came when no one else would. You fought when everyone said it was hopeless. You saved my people when the galaxy had already written us off as lost." She stepped forward and took Kevin's hands in her own. Her touch was cool and gentle. "On behalf of all Velhari, now and forever, I offer you our eternal gratitude. Your names will be written in our histories. Your deeds will be sung by our children. As long as a single Velhari draws breath, we will remember what humanity did for us." Kevin looked at the High Priestess, then at the thousands of Velhari watching from the walls. He thought about the men and women who had died to make this moment possible. He thought about their families back on Earth who would never see them again. "High Priestess," Kevin said, his voice rough with emotion, "we didn't come for glory. We didn't come for gratitude. We came because you called for help and nobody answered. That's something we couldn't accept. We believe that when someone is in trouble, when innocents are in danger, the only right thing to do is help them, no matter the cost." He paused, gathering himself. "The people we lost will never be forgotten by us either. They gave their lives so that your people could live. That sacrifice means everything." Solani nodded slowly. "Then let us honor them together, Admiral. Let us remember them as the heroes they were." The news of what had happened at the Volhari homeworld spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The story was told in 1,000 different ways on 1,000 different worlds. The young species from Earth, the ones the Council had dismissed as primitive and aggressive, had done the impossible. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss the situation. Ambassador Patricia Hayes represented humanity. She was a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice that hid a will of pure steel. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. Most of them had never seen a human in person before. They watched Patricia with a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something that might have been fear. "Ambassador Hayes," said the council speaker, a being made of crystalline structures that shimmered as it spoke. "Earth's actions in the Valhari system have created a difficult situation. You intervened in a matter that the council had declared should be allowed to proceed naturally." Patricia smiled politely. "With respect, Speaker, there was nothing natural about the extinction of an innocent civilization. The Devour Swarm is not a force of nature. It is an enemy that can be fought and beaten. No species has ever defeated the Swarm before," objected a representative from one of the older races. "That is no longer true." Patricia replied simply. The chamber fell silent. The aliens looked at each other, uncertain how to respond. "The Council demands to know," the speaker continued, "why Earth took this action. What did you hope to gain? What payment did you extract from the Valhari?" Patricia's smile faded. Her voice became harder. "We extracted nothing. We gained nothing except the knowledge that we did the right thing. On Earth, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We refuse to be people who do nothing." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. "You all received the Valhari distress call. You all heard them begging for help. You all chose to do nothing. We chose differently. That's the only explanation you're going to get." Patricia turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted in confused debate. In the months and years that followed, everything changed. Other species began reaching out to Earth. Some came seeking trade agreements. Some came seeking military alliances. Some came simply to understand the civilization that would cross the galaxy to help strangers. The Valhari became humanity's closest allies. They shared their knowledge of medicine and philosophy. They taught humans about the deeper patterns of the universe. And they never forgot what Earth had done for them. On the anniversary of the battle, Kevin Marsh returned to the Valhari homeworld. He was older now, his hair fully gray, his step a little slower. But his eyes still held the same fire they had held when he first gave the order to Ort. Answered the distress call, High Priestess. Solani met him at the memorial that had been built to honor the humans who had died defending her world. 8,216 names were carved into walls of white stone, surrounding a central plaza where Valhari and humans gathered together. "Your people still talk about you, Admiral," Solani said as they walked through the memorial. "They tell stories about the human who came to save us when no one else would." Kevin shook his head. "I just gave the orders. It was the men and women who followed those orders who did the real work. They're the heroes. Every single one of them." He stopped before a section of the wall and reached out to touch one of the names carved there. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant. She had died in the final day of battle when her station was hit during a swarm attack. She had stayed at her post until the end, coordinating communications that had helped save millions of lives. Every name on this wall represents someone who believed in something bigger than themselves, Kevin said quietly. They believed that some things are worth fighting for. They believed that helping others matters. They proved that humanity can be something good. Solani placed her hand on his shoulder. "They did more than prove it, Admiral. They inspired it. Because of what your people did here, other species are beginning to change. They are beginning to ask themselves why they stood by and did nothing. They are beginning to wonder if there is a better way. Kevin turned to look at her. You really think we made a difference? I know you did, Selani replied. The galaxy will never be the same. Because of you, because of all of you. Somewhere far away, in the cold depths of space between stars, another distress call went out. Another species faced a threat they could not overcome alone. Another voice cried out in the darkness, asking if anyone was listening. And across the galaxy, human ships began plotting courses to respond, because that was who humanity was now. That was who they had always been. Even when they did not know it themselves. Protectors, guardians, people who answered when others called for help. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the young species from the small blue world. When humanity answered a distress call, they came to fight. They came to win. And they never, ever gave up.